Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone across the globe joining us today. This is Jared from Acquia. Today's webinar is Building and Enhancing the Future of Drupal Sites with Cohesion, with Martin Anderson-Klutz from Digital Echidna and Ryan Bikini from Acquia. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any audio issues, please send them in the Q&A tab and I will assist you. If you have any questions for the presenters, please submit them in the Q&A tab as well, and they will answer them at the end of the presentation. Slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com and also sent to you via email within the next few days. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Ryan.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to be with you. The title of our webinar is Building and Enhancing the Future of Drupal Sites with Cohesion. This is Ryan Bikini. And before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself and let Martin introduce himself briefly as part of this process and give a quick overview of Acquia. Maybe I'll go ahead and get started and then pass it to Martin. I am the Director of Product Marketing for the Drupal Cloud, and that includes Cohesion, which is one of the many solutions within the Drupal Cloud. All the solutions within the Drupal Cloud are designed to enhance and improve the overall experience with Drupal, in addition to the amazing features that are available within the community. Quickly, a little bit about Acquia. In case you're not familiar with us, we are a market-leading digital experience platform that's built on top of Drupal. Our heritage is in Drupal. We've been around for over 12 years, and we support some of the biggest digital experiences, the most ambitious digital experiences in the world. We have over 3,000 customers. We have offices around the globe, and we've been recognized by analysts as one of the fastest movers when it comes to digital experience platforms and a market leader in digital experience platforms. As you can see here, we offer a full set of solutions for creating great digital experiences. Today, our focus is going to be on the Cohesion solution that enhances and makes the Drupal experience even better. Obviously, in creating any great digital experience, it includes both the technology and a partner who can provide a strategic vision, delivery capabilities, and help you get set up for long-term success. One of our long-standing partners is Digital Echidna. They've created some of the best experiences on Drupal that we've seen to date, and they have a really smart and deep team in terms of being able to help create the right strategy and deliver. So I'm going to pass it to Martin now to kind of give a quick overview of Digital Echidna as an organization, and then his background and why they've found value in Cohesion as part of their client offering. So Martin.
Thanks, Ryan. So for anyone out there who isn't familiar with Digital Echidna, I'll give you sort of a quick background. We're an 80-person team, but as you can see by the numbers on here, we're strong believers in some of the certification that Acquia offers, both in terms of really demonstrating our solid knowledge of Drupal. We have, 5 Drupal 8 Grandmasters, some of whom are double Grandmasters, as well as the certification available for specific products, including Acquia Cohesion. We're also proud to be a Acquia preferred partner and have actually done training for other organizations as an Acquia training partner. And the other part is that we're a strong believer that it's not just about the technology, but as Ryan said, the digital experience that it creates. And so we've had a number of our staff trained with the Nielsen Norman Group for UX certification. And that's been part of a contributor to our success in winning a couple of Acquia Engage Awards late last year, which we see as evidence of success, not just for Echidna, but more importantly for our customers. So a little bit about me. I've been with Echidna for over 5 years now. Actually been using Drupal for closer to 15 years and actually had the privilege to introduce Digital Echidna to Drupal some years ago before I even worked there. I've spoken at a number of Drupal camps and conferences, and as you can see here, I've definitely been passionate about demonstrating my own knowledge through those same certifications that we've talked about. So let's talk about the traditional development model and really to sort of baseline and understand how we think Cohesion actually can help organizations to use a different process model and really see some strong improvements because of that. So in the traditional waterfall type of an approach, you do that upfront discovery, use that for design, both visual and technical. Turn that into sometimes a long development phase. It's not uncommon for Drupal projects to go for 6 or 12 months. Then do some training with client stakeholders before moving on to launch the product. And then finally go into a support phase. But as we've seen, beyond some of the challenges that we've already mentioned in terms of, the long cycles, typically if needs change, if, market factors change, it can be hard to pivot and adapt while you're in the focus of development. And then oftentimes using this kind of approach, it's easy to launch a site with a lot of technical debt so that the support team is really focused largely on that and then technical upgrades as opposed to really helping to work with the client sort of strategically to set the future course for the site to help it evolve and continue to better and better serve its customers. So let's talk about the low-code approach. Really focuses on using a set of technologies that allow people with different skill sets to work more collaboratively in a way that doesn't force them to be writing code to really provide those kinds of ambitious digital experiences. Acquia Cohesion is a tool that helps people with minimal coding skills to design and build websites faster than they would otherwise. So it's great for using as just part of a site. If there's a particular part that needs to be particularly sort of compelling and engaging, can be great for an end-to-end build, or as was talked about in a week previous, it can be paired with Site Factory to really develop different websites at scale. So it's very flexible and, in that way, it's very in line with Drupal itself. So some of the key benefits that we've seen with Acquia Cohesion are really empowering the client and content and marketing teams to be able to build out different dynamic layouts to meet their needs, using drag and drop tools that are intuitive and easy to use, leveraging sort of component and atomic design principles to drive consistency, both design consistency as well as brand consistency, which can be very important. Also adopts what we're calling a configure once, reuse everywhere framework. So there's a lot of opportunities for usability built into Cohesion, again, to help with consistency, but also to help with efficiency. Backend teams then on a Cohesion-based product can really focus more on functionality, security, and maintenance, as opposed to having to worry as much around helping to support the themers to give them the tools that they need. And overall, one of the things that we're really excited about with Acquia Cohesion is its focus on the admin experience and really providing that world-class content editor experience to help them put together compelling content. In terms of process changes then, if you're designing your website project around using Cohesion, what we would recommend is more time spent in discovery and design phases, really embracing that atomic and component-based design so that, again, people can have very quickly a clear understanding of the visual language that the site will be built around, and that sort of coalesces into a master design system that we'll talk about later. It allows you to do knowledge transfer earlier in the process so that you can actually get the clients in and using those tools, getting them hands-on and getting feedback sooner. And it really allows for a different kind of interaction between the client and agency, or potentially it could be different departments within the same company really collaborating to produce the end result. So here's a slide that shows the traditional diagram, again, that very linear process, and how really changing that around to maximize the value of Cohesion has some pretty distinct differences. So obviously the main one that we've already talked about is moving the training up earlier. But even sort of, post-discovery, obviously discovery is as important as ever in terms of really drilling down into getting the client needs, the goals, and the overall functionality that has to be delivered in the solution. Typically, we would recommend including some UX research in there to make sure that the decisions are really data-driven and centered around the user's needs. But then you get into that phase of building out your master design system. So it's really built together to anticipate layout components and other elements, and it becomes the foundation and sort of the visual language that the site will adopt as it gets fleshed out and ultimately launches. So that's when we have that shift in training. The idea being to get the content owners engaged sooner, the knowledge transfer on using components and layout builders, layout helpers to help them build out the compelling pages and really get them ready for success, both in terms of the build out of the site and then ultimately for using it on in the future. That brings us to the parallel development phase. And by getting these different teams working together and in parallel, it definitely is going to increase the velocity. And the other benefit is that, again, by having the client engaged and part of the process sooner, you're going to be getting feedback sooner, and that helps everyone in terms of reducing the amount of feedback that you get sort of just immediately before launch when there's a scramble and everybody's trying to coordinate all kinds of different last-minute changes. Getting that feedback sooner in the process is invaluable. So we're talking about having a back-end team that's really going to be focused on, again, more the custom pieces of the site, maybe some third-party integrations, maybe some deeper, more complex parts of the overall site build. A configuration team that can be doing some, maybe helping the content team with some more complex layouts, working on the configuration and setup of the Cohesion design system, and maybe doing some light site building. And then finally, that content team that's really going to be getting hands-on, building out all the content, putting together those dynamic layouts that are really going to engage with the audience for the website. With all of that in place, then we're ready for what we would call a foundational launch. So the idea being to get the site live, get it to market, and then use that as the jumping off point where that sort of MVP initial product can then be built on and continue to evolve and grow over time. And so post-launch, we see an opportunity for, again, an improved model for the client and agency to be working together at that point. Then there's already that understanding of how the different needs will work together based on the types of challenges or problems that they're trying to solve or functionality that they're trying to create. And so that can help to sort of guide that continuing interaction. From a support standpoint, should be launching with less technical debt. And so the support team is able to focus more on sort of the strategic elements of how the site can better serve its audience. And again, work collaboratively to create those dynamic layout elements. So let's talk a bit more about those three different teams that were in that previous chart. In this example, we see the backend team as really what we would think of as that classic Drupal programmer. So building out custom modules, working on sort of more complicated content types and views, any complex functionality, third-party integrations, content migrations, those types of aspects of the overall project. For the configuration team, this would typically be composed of people who have some knowledge of site building, maybe some front-end development expertise, and definitely some design sense. Fundamentally, this team is going to be leveraging Cohesion and getting that well configured and building out all of the individual pieces that we're eventually going to make ready for the content team. But because Cohesion ultimately maps back to HTML markup and CSS, having some understanding of the underlying principles and opportunities for using those technologies is going to be important to really get the most out of Cohesion. From the content team standpoint, then, this team can be really comprised of people whose skills are not so much technical as more focused around communication and messaging. So they have the understanding of the end consumer that they're trying to speak to and the different ways that the content needs to be sort of structured and presented to really maximize the impact that the site is going to have. Also, we've talked a couple of times about the administrative experience. One of the things that's really strong about Cohesion is its focus on the ability to not only provide opportunities for creating those dynamic layouts, but also to have a focus around how those options get presented to the content editors. So Cohesion has overlap with some other solutions that the Drupal community has been working on for a while in terms of giving some of that power to content editors. So technologies like paragraphs, bricks, or layout builder are all examples of ways that the Drupal community has been building sites to try and give content editors some of that power. But oftentimes the challenge can be that, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Oftentimes we give content editors the power to make bad decisions that can lead to sort of broken or mangled looking layouts. And one of the things that's great about Cohesion is that it has the opportunity to also introduce some common sense restraints to help guide those content editors towards making good choices that are going to turn into consistent and compelling layouts. So how does that translate into benefits to the content editor? It makes a system that's easier to use, it's more intuitive, there's reduced training time in terms of understanding or gathering the skills to be able to use it effectively. And there's also, again, lots of opportunity for reuse, which can increase consistency, but also make it more efficient to use. So with that, I'm going to actually get hands-on here with Cohesion. And we're going to look at a sample landing page that's built in Cohesion. So fairly simple, but imagine as a content editor, we know that we need to add some messaging here. So let's go ahead and add in a new element. So what we're going to see here is actually the layout canvas. So it's a simplified representation of the actual content of the page. If we click on one of these, we can see the actual configuration where the editor puts all of the content into there. But in this case, we want to add a new element. So we're going to go ahead and add a CTA row. So pick a background image, pick one from the media library, and pick a color. Now you can see there's a reduced palette of colors here. Again, this is an example of how in Cohesion, as part of that configuration team, you have the ability to put in sensible defaults. So this component is designed to reverse the text out of the background, and so we don't want to give people pale colors as choices. It is also technically possible to allow a color picker, but again, oftentimes it's a better solution if it's really helping to guide those content editors towards making good choices. And let's put in a heading, just say, certified organic. And let's put in link text. Tell me more. And since we don't actually have a page for that, for now, we're just going to put in the home page, but you can see it's an autocomplete. If we wanted to, we could add a secondary link, but in this case, we're just going to go ahead and apply that. And so you can see how easy that was for a content editor to go in, make a few choices. Could have uploaded a custom picture if we wanted to, but pulling from the media library is often an effective way to handle that too. And very quickly, we've got our page updated. So let's also maybe take a look from the configuration standpoint at exactly what the experience of editing some of those components can be, because it's important to understand how that role is going to play out for members of that team. So there, in a similar way, there's a layout canvas. We can see there are different elements that we can add to that. And we've assembled essentially all of the different pieces of markup that we need to be able to structure that layout. But all of this is really abstracted away from the editor. If you remember going back to here, they only have to provide the necessary information, select the media, provide the messaging, and the pre-configured component does the rest. As we talked about before, though, Cohesion is also strong about giving consideration to that admin experience. So in the same way that we can assemble the actual layout that's going to be presented to visitors, there's also a similar interface for actually organizing and putting together the actual form for that component. So if we go in here, maybe we decide that the background image and color, we don't want to have those stacked because it's not as good a use of space. We could go in, add a field group. Let's just make that 2 columns so that we can be side by side instead. Let's go ahead, drop those in. You can see as soon as we said it was 2 column, as we drag in the elements, it automatically reduces them in width. And then we can go down in preview and see that it's actually made that change for us in the preview. So we're happy with that. We'll go ahead and save that. And then with that saved, let's just reload our edit interface. And now we can see those changes live. So Cohesion provides, again, that kind of interface to easily manage all of those types of decisions. There are interfaces for things like managing your color palette. So those range of choices. Those 3 were available, but you can see there's actually a much broader range of, or a broader palette of colors that we've defined for this particular website. But again, that's part of what we had defined in our background color element. So we went through and manually picked which ones we wanted to make available. But if we wanted to, we could allow a color picker or we could allow all colors. That's the kind of helpful control that's available within Cohesion. So one of the things that we're actually really excited about with Cohesion is also the UI kit that's available as a companion piece with Cohesion. So it's essentially a sketch file that you can download and then very easily customize to meet your needs. And then you can pull that together to sort of start to create or coalesce an overall master design system that really makes it clear and consistent across the entire, basically client and developer teams, gives a clear idea of exactly what's the visual language of the site is going to be and how that's all going to come together. And one other piece that is quite exciting about Cohesion is the Style Guide Manager, which is an excellent add-on module for Cohesion if you're going to be using it either on a complex site where you need to have, let's say, variations of the theme to make different sections visually distinct from each other, or potentially if you're using Cohesion with something like Site Factory where you're using it to manage sites at scale. It's a visual interface that helps you to sort of manage and make some of the same kinds of guided selections that we've already talked about as part of the main site interface. So taking this back to you and the organization that you work for, what are the ways in which Cohesion can sort of make your next project better? So definitely the approach of leveraging the master design systems, using that component-based approach to define the comprehensive sense of the visual language of the site is going to be really powerful to help get everyone aligned in terms of that end state that we're working for. The flexibility of creating that world-class admin experience, definitely very powerful, and again, helping to make it easy to use so that less technical members have all of the layout options that they need to create their messaging. It allows for that parallel development that we talked about so that more resources can be working concurrently to help get to that endpoint sooner, and also potentially use more cost-effective resources when possible for things like content entry. Overall, that's going to get you better speed to market, as well as getting that foundational launch much faster that you can then build on and iterate over time. From a support standpoint, there's a much better focus on strategy and new feature development, and reduce technical debt so that the support team can really focus on taking the site where it needs to go forward as opposed to just fixing the bugs that were inherited. And overall, the configuration and content teams will already have sort of a working understanding of how they can collaborate to build out new features, new functionality, new messaging, keep the site moving forward. All of that should translate into increased ROI so that, you know, again, more cost-effective resources being used to perform key tasks, and then potentially fewer dependencies. So as markets factors change and new messaging needs to go on the site in a hurry, we already saw how quickly and easy it can be to get some of that new messaging on the site. Ryan?
Thank you, Martin, for that. Again, this is Ryan from Acquia. We did have a few questions in the chat, so if there are other questions, now would be the time to put them in, and we're going to go ahead and answer a few of those questions. One of the first questions that we see here, Martin, is how does this work with translation or multi-language situations and sites? I'm sorry, I know we have, sorry, some of the next steps. So, Martin, did you want to try and take that one right now, or should we take the language question offline?
Yeah, let's take that offline, Ryan.
Okay, great. Just for context, though, I think we won't get into the details now, but we do have a few multi-brand conglomerates, one that's based in Germany, one that's based in Switzerland, that are using this Cohesion for their sites at scale. So they have tens or hundreds of sites. So that is a use case that we've certainly addressed with Cohesion. We'd be more than happy to kind of walk through your specific use case and what you're looking to accomplish. Just reading through a few other questions. Martin, would love to kind of get your take for some of the folks who are longtime Drupalists. You know, at a high level, I know you've walked through the key benefits of Cohesion. One of the questions that often comes up, which I've seen once or twice here in the chat, is how does this differ from Layout Builder? And how do you usually articulate that to, you know, your customers who are familiar with Drupal?
So I think the key difference, I mean, Layout Builder is obviously an impressive technology of its own, and one that is also supported by Acquia. And I've heard discussions that I think over time we'll see some opportunities for the two of those technologies to work together. But from my standpoint, the key benefit of Layout Builder is really its ability, or sorry, of Cohesion is really its ability to tailor that admin experience, and really the focus there. For Layout Builder, again, it's still a very new technology, and particularly the admin experience is something you can configure. For example, if you're using inline blocks, you definitely have some opportunities to try and structure that form a little better. But I know it's still quite labor intensive to really provide a simple to use interface that gives the content editors the kind of dynamic layout options, particularly in terms of applying different colors and some of those kinds of options.
Great, thank you for that. The next question that I have is, I'm just gonna go through the chat. One moment, please. Can you buy a little bit about the pricing model folks are asking about? So essentially Cohesion is, it's a per site model. So think about however many number of sites that you have, it is a license for each of those sites. You know, one of the things that we also are asked is, you know, you're providing this UX layer, this experience layer on top of Drupal. Does this limit my ability to utilize modules and components within Drupal? And the answer is no. So it's just using them in a different way, but all the components of Drupal are compatible and can be used within Cohesion. It's just a matter of, there is a license fee for the additional value that we provide on top of Drupal. And then, let me see. Drupal, the question is, another question that we have is, can you use Cohesion with an existing Drupal site? The answer to that at a high level is it's best to utilize Cohesion with a net new Drupal site, specifically customers who are transitioning from Drupal 7 to 8 or 9. It's a great use case to look at those sites and to evaluate Cohesion as part of how you're going to build and enhance that site and manage that site long term. We have had some use cases where it can be plugged into an existing Drupal 8 site. That is really done on a case-by-case basis, depending on how the site is architected. So we'd ask that you inquire with an Acquia rep or an Acquia engineer, or of course, Digital Echidna, to talk a bit more about your specific installation and if Cohesion is right for your existing site. Can content author... Yeah, so a question for you, Martin. Can content authors create complex layouts like grids with Cohesion?
For sure. So, I'm trying to think. I mean, definitely in terms of having, I'll say, more grid-based components, some of those are actually part of that UI kit that Cohesion comes with. Additional ones can be built. I'm trying to think if there's an example I can show here. Let me try and open this back up. So let me just cancel this and go back to our landing page. If we were to have, I know this one has a single component drop zone, but I believe there's, if we use a standard hero, you can see it actually has 4 different ones. And so these are organized to display in a single row, but if you wanted to have some kind of more of a deeper grid, you could definitely build out your component to allow more components to be dropped in there. Alternatively, if you're talking about using Cohesion to do something like, let's say, take a view of products and display those in a grid, there are definitely multiple ways to make something like that work. Does that answer the question?
I think that's great for now, Martin. If
Okay.
further clarity is needed, then
Sure.
please reach out to Acquia or Digital Echidna, and we'll make sure to provide additional clarity.
For sure.
Another question that we have here from one of our partners is, when will Cohesion work with Lyft? Thank you for that question. The answer is it works with Lyft today. It's in beta. It will be GA within the next few weeks. So if you have a customer who is building with, and you're building with Cohesion, and they're also using Lyft, please reach out. We'll make sure that we can give you a more definitive timeline based on your needs. Another question that's in here is, how can we partners articulate the cost benefit of Cohesion versus Drupal Layout Builder besides the admin editing? And I think this is, I think Martin kind of honed in on this at one part in the presentation, but it's really looking at the whole life cycle of the site. There's obviously the build process and the transition of the work from primarily being development heavy to allowing non-technical users to be able to manipulate layouts, to update styles, to import content. So while it's historically been developer heavy, that the first thing is you look at the cost of some of the resources or people who are now going to be doing some of the work, even in the build phase. But then when you look at the authoring and then the enhance and support model, again, you can talk to your clients about, there's not as much of a need for a big retainer to support the site and update the site, because that work, if they don't have devs in-house, because that work can transition to a site builder, a designer, and in many cases, even a digital marketer. So it's not just about the editing, it's about the shift in terms of the resources who are going to be able to play an active role in building and enhancing the site, and the cost with those various resources. And then, you also have to, in that equation, to the partner who asked that question, in that equation, this is also going to, enable the customer relationship to be much stronger, because they're not going to be as reliant, but the experience for the end user is vastly improved. And so there is that uplift in terms of client satisfaction with the overall project, as well as the speed. The speed is one of the primary drivers in terms of how fast things can get to market. So with that, I guess going back to the initial build phase, it's dramatically compressed because of the shared workload, and what is the value that that customer places on the speed and what they can do in that incremental time that's given back to them that would typically be in a development cycle. So hopefully that helped. Martin, anything you want to add there?
I guess the only piece that I might add to that is really the some of the controls that Cohesion provides that can help with things like brand consistency. So depending on, I suppose, what types of people might be doing the content updates or adding in incremental content, the ability to have those guidelines that really ensure that everything is going to be kept brand consistent can also be a benefit.
Great. Thanks, Martin. And another question we have here, Eric, thank you for your question. How granular can you get with permissions in terms of access to a component's options? Say, with a hero component, could you allow certain roles to only update the text but not swap out the image? So Martin, do you want to take a first pass at that, or would you like me to?
Why don't you go ahead?
I mean, the bottom line here, Eric, is that you can, you might have a scenario where if you don't want the image to get swapped out, that you create a separate component for that image, and you have permissions and roles around that image, and then you can just drag a hero image and then the subsequent copy underneath it. But the reality is you can control, from my understanding, and Martin, keep me honest, you can set permissions for each component. Within those components, though, there's not a permission level setting for the inputs of that component. So it would be at the component level. You wouldn't necessarily be able to create permissions within a component. But the way that the layout canvas is structured, it should be easy to create multiple components in the event that there is, for example, the images you don't want touched, and you want to have permissions specifically tied to them.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Ryan. It sounds to me like it's a good use case for building that as a separate component and managing the permissions that way.
Great. There's another question in the chat about a certification for Cohesion with Drupal, and the answer is yes. That'll be out here in the next 2 weeks. We do have some select partners and customers who have been through that process, and it should be generally available very soon. So you can check back on our website for that. You can also, obviously, as mentioned in the last slide, you can download a sandbox of Cohesion. It's on the Cohesion product page on acquia.com. So that is an option for those of you who want to get your hands on Cohesion, run it in a test environment, or if you have a project that you're working on, get a sense of how it would operate and be able to utilize it for that specific project. Just going through the questions here, seeing what else we may be able to answer today. Here's one for you. I think, Martin, this would be best directed to you. can the style guide and UI kit be used prior to the site's implementation?
So I think if I understand it right, the spirit of the question is really understanding if you can use that in almost like the planning phase before the site is even installed. And to the extent that it really is a sketch file, absolutely, you can download that sketch file from the website and use that even for early stage planning to start having those conversations with your client around. It hopefully provides quite an array of different components that would be common for different types of websites. And so you can use that for your own planning and discussions around what components are going to be needed. But it can also be a really great tool for starting to iterate through different color choices, different font choices, some of those kinds of things. So yes, I would say absolutely it can be used as part of the process before implementation.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Just going to do one last scan here through the questions to make sure we've addressed the ones we can for today. Yes, I think that we're all set. So if there are any other questions, give folks just one more minute to put them in the chat and we'll try to get them answered. But as a reminder, in terms of next steps, you can sign up for a Cohesion Sandbox, like I just mentioned. You can contact sales at Acquia to set up a detailed demo. And obviously you can contact Digital Echidna to help you think about reevaluating how you build and update sites. Like I mentioned, they've been a great partner for us over the years. Obviously Martin's expertise in being a longtime Drupalist and his team, they can get you set on the right track. So please don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. I think that those are all of the questions for today. One last spin through the chat. And yep, I think we're set for today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining across the globe. We appreciate you being with us today to learn more about Acquia Cohesion and how Digital Echidna has helped some of our customers enable this new approach to building and enhancing sites. This recording will be available, and so will some of the content that was presented today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, and thanks again for joining. Hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, Ryan and Martin. Thank you all again for attending our webinar today. As I said previously, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com and sent to you via email within the next few days. If you have any additional questions, please send them to marketing@theacquiateam.com. Thanks again and have a great day.